The Tennis Gambling Podcast on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network is brought to you by Nordic Fantasy. Nordic is giving away $15 million at WrestleMania 5. Sign the promo code SGPN to claim your first time deposit offer. That's for bonus cash on Nordic Fantasy promo code SGPN. We're also brought to you by Rhythm. Rhythm's college football and NFL picks and projections are now live. Claim your 7-day free trial today by going to sportsgamblers.com, rhythmsportsgamblers.com/RITHMM. And welcome, everybody, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast here on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. It's currently early Saturday morning, roughly 12:30 a.m. Eastern Time on August 3rd. I'm your host, always, Scott Reichel, once again going solo for this pod. Should be a fun episode because it's officially the final Olympic episode that we're going to have, as we are going to be covering two matches here. We're going to be covering the bronze medal match between Musetti and Auger-Aliassime, taking place on Saturday. And, of course, we are going to cover the gold medal match between Alcaraz and Djokovic on Sunday. So if you were not aware of the schedule for the actual remainder of the Olympics for tennis, once again, the gold medal match is on Sunday. Bronze medal match is on Saturday. So we're going to go through both of those. Before that, though, I do want to recap what happened in the last episode. I'm going to also do an episode for the Washington semis in the morning, as I believe the semis started around 7 p.m. Eastern. So I'm probably going to save the recap for the actual Washington quarters for that episode, but I'll recap the actual semis with the lock and dog picks for that one in the Olympics right now. Before we get into any of that, though, I remind you once again to like, subscribe on YouTube, and a reminder to also leave a rating and review if you're still listening to the podcast on Spotify or Apple. You can still show support no matter how you do consume the podcast. I believe the subscribers now are in the 430s, I think. So hopefully we'll get to 500 soon, but appreciate you if you have been subscribing recently, and hopefully if you have not, you found the podcast recently and you hit the subscribe button. Either way, though, a point is a reminder that not just to follow this show, but also to follow the show on the merch store, as we also do have some Tennis Gambling Podcast merch. We have shirts, sweatshirts, and mugs, high quality, very affordable. Recommend you getting yourself something. Plus, we have other shows that also have merchandise. For example, the NBA Gambling Podcast show. So if you do want to get a something from that show as well, you can. A point is, though, they have a couple of featured shows for the network, and right now the featured show is actually the Mothership Show, the Sports Gambling Podcast, which launched their 32 NFL team previews, and as a bonus, each team preview episode will have a code word. Submit the 32 code word phrase, and you could win a potential $500 NFL Circa future bet. Plus, a reminder, subscribe where you get your podcast, and also download the SGPN app. So time to get into the actual recap of what happened in the Olympics on Friday, starting off with the lock and dog picks. Unfortunately, did not sweep, but we basically broke even. Starting off with the lock, ended up losing, as we had Musetti plus 3.5. Looked decent early. It was tied 4-4 in the first set, and then eventually Musetti kind of fell apart with his actual serve. I'll get into that in a second. But Djokovic dominated the second set, and Musetti did lose in straight sets. As for the dog, we had a nice easy winner, as we had Alcaraz and Auger-Aliassime. We had the first set under 9.5 games at even money, and that was never in doubt, as Alcaraz ended up winning 6-1, 6-1. So broke even. Once again, nothing that was really, I'd say, impressive or awful about the results that we had for these matches, but I'll get into the recap right now. So starting off with the first matchup, you had one that was supposed to be competitive, or at least kinda, based on form. I did not think that Felix would be able to do anything against Alcaraz. I did also like the Felix team total under 8.5 in that game in that match as my second favorite option besides the dog play. And that got there easily, as you ended up seeing just a complete ass kicking. Really no way around it. To go through the scoreline once again, it was 6-1, 6-1. So Felix basically didn't show up for the entire match, and Alcaraz dominated with really no resistance at all. Now, you could argue that there were some external factors because Felix also was playing mixed doubles, so he was playing a lot of tennis, and he actually did win a bronze medal. So congratulations to Felix for winning the mixed doubles bronze. But the point is he was playing a lot of tennis, and it just seemed like he was exhausted for the entirety of the matchup. But the reason why I expected a pretty lopsided win for Alcaraz was because of what happened in the French Open, and we saw Alcaraz win all three sets with less than 10 games. I just kind of expected Alcaraz to dominate, and Felix, after beating Ruud and after playing so much tennis with the doubles, I was a little bit concerned about fatigue, but it was mostly Alcaraz just being significantly better than him, and that's kind of what happened, as Alcaraz did win by almost the widest of margins, 6-1, 6-1, close to 6-0, 6-0. Point is, though, Felix showed up physically, not mentally, and Alcaraz killed him. So pretty much a very lackluster match there to start the semifinals. And the second match was better, but not by much. Djokovic also won in straight sets, as he won 6-4, 6-2. Mentioned it before, Musetti was competitive early on, as he ended up having a 4-4 in the first set. And then Musetti just could not hold serve to save his life. You ended up seeing 4-4 turn to 6-4. So, okay, Djokovic broke once to end the first set. That was the only break of the entire set. Then Musetti broke immediately to start the second. And at that point, we thought, okay, we're in decent shape. We got a break, and maybe Musetti can keep the momentum rolling. First set was competitive, so it wasn't like Djokovic barely held on to win 6-4. It was a spot where Musetti actually led 40-love in the final service game and then lost the next 5 points. So Musetti, once again, had a spot there to take a 5-4 lead in the first. Then it kind of fell apart. But from that point forward, Joker just returned like an absolute madman. So Musetti got the break. Then Djokovic got the break back. So you're like, okay, not ideal, whatever. Once again, we only needed a 7-6 for Djokovic in the second set to win, as we had Musetti plus 3.5. So then Musetti gets the break again, and you're like, okay, he got back-to-back breaks. Sweet, we're up 2-1 again with a break. And then Musetti got broken again. And then you're like, okay, well, that's not ideal. 4 breaks to start the second set. Then Djokovic held, and at that point, you need Musetti to actually hold for once, and he did not hold. So to go through the actual scoreline here, Djokovic broke Musetti in each of his last 5 service games. Both games Musetti won in the second set were from breaking Djokovic. He held 0 times in the second set. So Musetti's serve completely fell apart. It wasn't even like he was serving badly. It just seemed like Djokovic was everywhere, and he raised his level, and Musetti kind of plateaued, and that's what happened. But Djokovic dominated. And anytime you get broken 5 straight times in a match, you're probably going to lose. And that's how we ended up losing for the semifinal matchup for the lock. Now, I can't really say that it was an awful read because, once again, Musetti did have a very competitive first set, and he was up a break on 2 separate occasions in the second set. But unfortunately, Musetti's serve just completely betrayed him over the back half of the match. And Djokovic was kind of coasting after getting that second break at the 1-2 game to even it up at 2-2. He coasted from that point forward as Djokovic did win the final 5 games of the match. So, point is, I feel like Musetti has still been in great form. Wasn't really a fatigue issue, though. Unlike the Felix match, I know Alcaraz is, of course, significantly better than Felix, but I do think that the extra tennis did play a factor in Felix's struggles, and I'm not exactly sure if playing a bronze medal match the day after is going to help. I'll mention that in a second when we get into the preview. Point is, though, it just felt like Musetti was fine, but Djokovic was great. And any concerns about the knee that were brought up in the quarterfinal match were quickly removed from conversation as Djokovic looked great for the entirety of the match. So point is, Musetti I thought was fine. I think if he played like that against most players on clay, he would have at least won a set, maybe potentially won the match, but Joker was just too solid, and he eventually got the job done pretty comfortably on the scoreline. A 6-4, 6-2. So a very underwhelming day of tennis. Now, if you do love the Alcaraz-Djokovic rivalry, which I personally do, it's a great final for tennis fans, but the path to the final was pretty lackluster, as you're looking at Alcaraz, who has not dropped a set yet in the entire event, and Djokovic has also not dropped a set in the entire event. So both guys have kind of coasted. I know Djokovic had a bit of a sweat there in the Tsitsipas match for the second set. Alcaraz did have a sweat in the second set of the Paul match. Point is, though, both guys have not dropped a set yet, and we do have the best 2 players here, in my opinion, by a wide margin, playing against each other for the gold medal. So we'll get into that in a second, but once again, kind of an underwhelming card itself for the Olympics on Friday. Now it's time to get into the actual preview of the bronze medal match, but before we get into that, I want to remind you once again that we are brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Because Underdog Fantasy just launched their Underdog Streaks. If you hit your first 2 pick'em entries, they can go streaking. If you get an 11-0 run, you can win 1,000 times your money. Plus, WrestleMania Live is live with $15 million in prizes. You can now use specials and boosts on all flex entries, and I'll probably end up using my entry with Carlik Jones. We'll go with the higher at 15.5 points for him in that upcoming matchup against Serbia on Saturday. Covered that in the NBA Gambling podcast with Lante if you want some basketball thoughts for the Saturday card. Either way, though, sign up the promo code SGPN to claim your special pick and first deposit offer of tomorrow's bonus cash on Fantasy promo code SGPN. We're also brought to you by OddsJam. OddsJam is your one-stop shop for beating the sportsbooks. OddsJam uses millions of data points across every U.S. and Canadian sportsbook to show you the best value plays for your money. The line shopping tool shows you the best price for any bet you want to make across countless sportsbooks, and not just DraftKings and FanDuel, but also BetOnline, Bovada, Cut, and many more. They have an arbitrage tool as well, which helps you find opportunities where you can bet both sides of the same prop in different sportsbooks to guarantee yourself a positive ROI. Their new fantasy tool features the highest EV plays relative to the sportsbook's odds. So you can definitely have extra opportunities to crush Underdog Fantasy and other platforms like that. They even have a tool for finding the best sign-up bonuses. If you're interested in trying out OddsJam, you can get a 7-day free trial by using the link below. And don't forget to use the promo code SGPN to get 35% off your first month of the subscription, oddsjam.com, promo code SGPN. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast. Just finished recapping what happened in the Olympics on Friday. Time to move on to the one match on Saturday. Going to look at the matchup between Felix and between Musetti. For this one, Musetti is a favorite to win the bronze medal at about minus 130. Felix is around plus 110. For the spread here, you have -1 for Musetti. You have +1 for Felix. The over-under is around 22.5 games. For set wagering, Musetti in straight sets is +190. Felix to win in straight sets is +250. Now, I have to mention the head-to-head, which has been very competitive, and it actually has kind of benefited Felix recently, as Felix has won each of the last 2 meetings in straight sets. However, both meetings were not on clay, so I don't know if that actually matters or not. But the point is, both meetings that they've had in the last couple of years, both in 2022, were won by Felix. Now, to go through the head-to-head history that supports Musetti, they have faced off a couple of times on clay. 3 times to be exact. Musetti did lose the first one in 3 sets in Barcelona, but he eventually did win the next 2, beat Felix in Lyon in 2021 in 3 sets, and he also beat Felix in straight sets in Monte Carlo in 2022. So the point is, Musetti recently in the last 2 meetings proved he was the better clay player. They were dated, though, about 2 years ago, so we'll see how they look in this one. Now, I have to at least mention once again the, I'd say, issue that I have with Felix right now, which is just the sheer volume of tennis matches that he's played, because he had to go through doubles, and he ended up making it all the way to the bronze medal match in mixed doubles, which he ended up winning. So congrats to him once again. But it's a lot of tennis. And we saw against Alcaraz, he was completely cooked physically. I believe he had no aces in the match, or he might have had one. That was basically it. So his serve was completely neutralized by Alcaraz, and that just seemed like a sign of fatigue, and maybe Felix can get back on track in this one because he ended up finishing his doubles requirement on Friday. But I have to at least acknowledge the fact that, sorry, I take it back. So Felix had 1 ace in the entire match, and the point is he was really not that effective. He was 4 for 20 on second serve points. 4 for 20. You're not going to win when that happens. So Alcaraz dominated the second serve return, and that was kind of the story of the match. But the point is Felix has played a lot of tennis, and I do question if his stamina will be there if this turns into a marathon, which history suggests might happen between them on clay. Now, Felix, I do think, has been in good form, has been some good competition, ended up winning the first couple rounds comfortably. Then he had a marathon match against Ruud, which he ended up winning in 3 sets. Should have won in straight sets, but he choked it away, but then he ended up rallying to win the 3rd set comfortably. But to recap the path here, lost to Alcaraz 6-1, 6-1, ended up beating Ruud in 3, beat Medvedev in straight sets, competitive. Then he ended up beating Marter 6-0, 6-1, and he beat Giron 6-1, 6-4. So Felix has been solid in the event, obviously, because he's here for the bronze medal, and he's been pretty convincing with most of his wins. He's only dropped a set in 2 of the matches, 1 to Alcaraz, and of course 2 to Alcaraz and 1 to Ruud. The point is, though, I think Felix, with the amount of tennis he's had to play and the fact that he had to play doubles in addition to singles basically right after each other, I thought was kind of a tough schedule spot for Felix. Now, luckily, that was right after, so you have about 21 hours maybe to actually recover, maybe a little bit less than that for Felix. So maybe he'll look rested for this one compared to what happened in the semifinal match. But Musetti's still been very good. And yes, I know that Alcaraz is better right now than Djokovic in their careers at this point. But with Djokovic being past his prime and Alcaraz not even reaching the peak yet. Point is, though, Musetti had not dropped a set yet before the Djokovic loss, and we already talk about it every episode. Musetti had won 16 of his last 19 matches. So 16 of 20 is still pretty good. And Musetti, unlike Felix, had no doubles requirement. So you could argue that there was a bit more rest because Musetti did lose very early on in Olympics doubles. He ended up losing with Darderi, I think, in the first round to Jari and Tabilo. So no doubles really required for Musetti recently, and he's been able to focus solely on singles. And I do think that Musetti should look a bit sharper based on the, I'd say he spent less time on court. Let's use that terminology for this breakdown. Musetti, though, I think should be favored. Anytime you've won 16 of 20, I'm not going to kind of ignore that stat. And I feel like I might sound like a broken record because I've mentioned it while updating Musetti's record after every episode. But I have to mention it because 16-4 is really good. And Felix has been solid here as well. We know that his form can be up and down, but I do think Musetti is the better player, and I think he's better on clay. Is it by a lot? Not really, but I think that Musetti has proven in the last couple of weeks that he's a serious threat on clay. Felix, at the end of the day, beat Ruud, who I know that I'm not the biggest fan of, that I mentioned it several times on this show. Ruud is still a very solid clay player. Made the French Open Finals before twice, and he ended up making it to the semis numerous times. I think it was 4 times in a row. Point is, nice win by Felix, but I do think Musetti, based on his current form, is better than Felix right now. And the fatigue angle, I can't ignore. I think it is a factor. So I am going to link to Musetti in this one at minus 130. The price feels a bit cheap to me, and I do think the line will actually climb closer to the start of the match. But Musetti has won the last 2 clay meetings, and I do think that Felix winning the last 2 meetings that were not on clay is kind of irrelevant because Musetti has always been more comfortable on clay, and I do think that he's going to look sharp in this one. So I am going to link to Musetti in this one. I think if you want to go for the over-under, I actually don't have a strong opinion on it. I feel like most people are going to take the over, just based on the history between them on clay. There is a chance Felix physically isn't going to be fully back at 100%. And if that's the case, Musetti might beat him in straight sets. So I think I am going to stay away from the total. I think I might actually lean to the under as kind of a hot take. You can find 23.5 at minus 140. But I do think that Felix is in trouble here. He might win it, and if he did, I wouldn't be totally shocked. But the just lackluster, I'd say, effort physically in that semifinal match against Alcaraz is concerning. Musetti lost, but you can tell he was still moving around well. Djokovic just flipped a gear. And yes, I know Alcaraz looked great as well, but Felix just didn't seem to have it, and it seemed like he was a bit lethargic out there on Friday, and I think that could be an issue of just overload for the amount of tennis he's had to play. So not exactly a great spot having to play the day after as well, after playing 2 matches, 1 singles, 1 doubles on Friday, when he was already battling fatigue. I'm going to go with Musetti in this one. I think he'll get the job done. Moving on to the main attraction for this episode, you have the final taking place on Sunday, the gold medal matchup between Alcaraz and Djokovic. Who could have seen this coming? You have the 2 guys who are the best 2 players in the world since Sinner is not here with tonsil issues, so it's definitely not a shocker. You basically had the 1 seed versus the 2 seed, who once again did not drop a set in the entire event. So it's been a pretty straightforward path for both guys. Either way, though, Alcaraz is a pretty big favorite, and you're looking at the actual price. He's minus 220. Djokovic is plus 190. The over-under is at 22.5 games. You can find the spread minus 2.5 for Alcaraz at around minus 145. Djokovic plus 2.5 is plus 115. For the set spread here, you have Alcaraz in straight sets at plus 125. Djokovic in straight sets at minus 155, and the over-under, the over 2.5 sets is plus 130. So for this matchup, it's a rematch of the Wimbledon final where Alcaraz kicked his ass, and we had Alcaraz money line in that one. I didn't forget. A point is, I do have to at least point out that Alcaraz, since losing the Cincinnati Marathon last year, and since losing in the ATP final last year in straight sets, and I think that was the semis, and then Djokovic beat Sinner in the final, I believe. Alcaraz has been good against Djokovic, and Alcaraz has actually won the last 2 meetings. Now, one of them was an exhibition in 2023, and you saw Alcaraz win that one in 3. Not really a fair comparison because that was an exhibition, but he still won in 3 sets, and you ended up seeing them in Wimbledon, and Alcaraz gave Djokovic probably the biggest ass-kicking he's had in Wimbledon in at least a decade. I mean, that was a bloodbath, a 6-2, 6-2, 7-6, and it was only 7-6 because Alcaraz got broken when having multiple match points. So I do think Alcaraz has proven at this stage in their careers that he is the better player right now. However, Djokovic is still obviously the best player of all time, and he's still capable of beating anybody on any given day. So do I think Djokovic has a shot to win this? Yes. Am I picking him to win this match? No. Now, I do want to give a shout out to Djokovic because no matter what happens in this matchup, this is officially a new career best for his Olympic career. Djokovic had topped out with a bronze medal in the Olympics in the past. Now he officially gets a silver or a gold. It's really the one thing missing from his tennis resume. If he wins a gold medal, he's basically accomplished everything in singles. So you'd argue that there is a little bit of a chip on his shoulder for Djokovic. And maybe for Alcaraz being young, the nerves might be there. Alcaraz has won multiple Grand Slams. He's beaten Djokovic in multiple Grand Slams as well. I don't believe that. I was throwing it out there for the sake of it, but the point is, I do think Alcaraz is not going to feel nervous after beating Djokovic in Wimbledon back-to-back years and after having a lot of marathon matches against Djokovic in the past. I see a fun matchup. I would lean to Alcaraz winning, but I think a lot of people are expecting this to be a pretty straightforward match. I think most people are expecting Alcaraz to win comfortably, just based on what we saw. It was on grass, but the argument was maybe that was the official passing of the torch. Maybe it was Wimbledon last year where they ended up having the a massive marathon, which ended up going 5. The point is, I do think you're looking at a spot where Alcaraz has been able to beat Djokovic on big stages before, and I don't think that the actual environment's going to be too much for him, but I don't expect Djokovic to roll over. People might expect Alcaraz to win comfortably because if you beat Djokovic on his best surface, then why would it not beat Djokovic easily on clay? Djokovic has been really good. And the only issue that I had with him for that semifinal matchup, the reason why I did lean to Musetti in that actual match itself, was the knee issue. But Djokovic looked completely fine, and I thought his return game was excellent against Musetti. So you might get a lot of breaks in this one. We know Alcaraz's second serve is still kind of a weakness for him. But I think I am going to go with Alcaraz winning, and I probably would lean to the games, but I'm actually going to go with the over in this one. I see a pretty close matchup. I really don't see one guy dominating the other one. I think a lot of people are going to look at what happened on a Friday and assume Alcaraz winning 6-1, 6-1 is going to potentially dominate again after what happened in Wimbledon. But I think Djokovic will look very good against Musetti. And I think Musetti, as I said before in the bronze medal game, I think he's the better clay player than Felix, and he was 16-3 in his last 19 before. And Djokovic did end up winning in relatively straightforward fashion. So I do think Djokovic has been solid in the event, obviously, not dropping a set, and I'm going to give him the respect that I think he deserves. I'm going to expect Djokovic to hang in there. He might not win a set, but maybe he'll get a breaker in there. I'm going to lean to the over in that one. See a question from Mike. If I think minus 250 for Alcaraz and plus 180 for Djokovic seem right to me, I see 220 from what I'm looking at right now, but I'm sure some books do have 250. Most books are probably going to juice up Alcaraz because they really don't expect anybody to take Djokovic after what happened in Wimbledon. So I think that line looks a bit large to me. Do I think Alcaraz should be favored? Yes. If I had to price it myself, minus 175, give or take. Like a pretty sizable favorite, but I wouldn't cross 2-1, or minus 200, I mean. I think it's a little bit steep, so I think I am going to lean to Djokovic for the value there, but I'm picking Alcaraz to win. I just think Alcaraz has reached that point in his career where he's the best player, and Djokovic is still amazing, but nowhere near as good as he used to be in his prime, and I think that's going to be a serious problem for Djokovic if this goes the distance. Now, I am leaning to Alcaraz to win because I do think he's the better player, but give me the over, and I am going to lean to the idea that a 3-set war might be in store here. So I'll go with the over 2.5 sets at plus 130. Shop around, you'll probably find a better line. There's probably a plus 135 or 140 out there, but I am going to lean to the over in games as well. That's going to wrap it up, though, for the actual preview of the bronze medal and the gold medal matches for the men's side. Time for the lock and dog picks. But for the end of that one, remind me once again that we are brought to you by Rhythm, because Rhythm has a lot of great options for football. Football season's here, and the college football and NFL models are now live on Rhythm. Create your own winning betting model, or let Rhythm do the heavy lifting for you. You decide what stats matter to you, and Rhythm can build you a custom model around it. Or just let Rhythm and its predictive model do the heavy lifting. Rhythm uses AI projections from MIT data scientists. Rhythm already has you covered for NFL Week 1 and college football Week 0. And you can also claim a 7-day free trial today to try it out yourself with the link, sportsgamblingpodcast.com/rhythm, sportsgamblingpodcast.com/RITHMM. We're also brought to you by Circuit Survivor and Circuit Millions. Circuit Sports is back with Circuit Survivor and Circuit Millions, giving away $16 million in guaranteed prizes. And you can also look at going to Vegas. If you don't get your book there for Las Vegas, what are you waiting for football? Ultimate Contest Weekend's a great time to go. Hang out with Ryan and Sean and enjoy some of the open bar events, the World Bet Sportsbook, from August 22nd through the 24th. Use promo code SGP15. Save you 15% off your hotel room for sign-up weekend. Sign up in person at Circuit Sports between now and September 7th and use a proxy play from anywhere. We also have a deal with a proxy. Go to proxy.footballcontest.com and you can save $50 with the promo code SGP. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast. Just finished previewing the gold medal match and the bronze medal match for the Olympics in men's tennis. Time for the lock and dog picks. Now, I am going to break it down pretty evenly. I'm going to have one play from the bronze medal match and one play from the gold medal match, so I did kind of divide it that way. For the lock, I actually am going to go back to the last match that I talked about, the gold medal match between Alcaraz and Djokovic. For this one, I did consider the over, and I did think it's going to be a close matchup. I am going to go with a team total as my play. Might sound risky because Alcaraz did just win his last match, only dropping 2 games in the process. But I am going to go with Alcaraz team total over, 12.5 at minus 120. Alcaraz, as I said before, has not dropped a set yet in the event, but he has gone to a tie break in 2 of the last 4 matches. So I do think Alcaraz has been involved in a couple of marathon sets. Paul took him to a breaker. Greek Sport took him to a breaker. I think Djokovic can force at least a 7-5 or 7-6. Couple ways to get there, though. You can win in straight sets if you get at least one competitive set, or you go 3, and then Alcaraz could maybe get there by losing anyway, where you end up getting a 3-set marathon, and Alcaraz ends up with, for example, 6 games in the first set, 4 games in the second set, and 3 in the third set, and you end up with 13 anyway. So I do think you can get there in a couple of ways, but if I'm picking the over, I think this kind of gives you some insurance, because if it turns into a marathon, you probably get the team total over there anyway. But if Alcaraz does win in straight sets, but at least one set's competitive, that gives you a bit of extra leeway to get this team total over. So either way, a reminder, they face off 2 times on clay. Was a bit dated. Both meetings did not end in straight sets. The French Open meeting where Alcaraz started cramping in the third set, and he got killed in the final 2 sets, but that was still tied 1-1 after 2. So that was still a competitive match, and they faced off in, I believe it was Madrid, where Alcaraz ended up beating, I think it was Nadal and Djokovic in back-to-back matches, then he beat Zverev in the final, which is like an all-time run by anybody. But that matchup ended up going to 3 sets as well. Point is, both meetings on clay did not end in straight sets. I think Djokovic is going to lose, but I think he's going to go down swinging, and I think that he's definitely capable of pulling this off. I think that these odds suggest Alcaraz should win comfortably. I don't agree with that. I think it's going to be closer than people think, and I do think, with that being said, the team total over 12.5 gives you leeway. If Alcaraz wins in straight sets, but one set is competitive, that's all you need. So give me Alcaraz team total over 12.5 games at -120 as my lock. For my dog, I am going to go to the bronze medal match between Musetti and Felix. I am going to back the fatigue angle on behalf of Felix, and I am going to go with Musetti -2 for the spread at +110. Musetti's still won 16 of his last 20. The main talking point for me for the actual spread, he has covered this spread in 14 straight wins. So when Musetti wins, he covers the 2. So I do think you're looking at a spot. No pushes, by the way. All wins, and he's had a bunch of straight set wins in this event. So I do think Musetti, if I'm picking him to win the match, I think it's a pretty safe option to go for the spread to save 40 cents in the process. But if Felix is still going to be tired, playing all those doubles matches and playing singles as well, with no days off in between, I do think it's going to come back to bite him again. And I do think that Musetti is the better clay player in general. I think he is the better player based on current form. And the fact is, I do think playing that many matches is definitely concerning for Felix based on stamina for this match, especially if you like the spread, because Musetti can, in theory, drop a set, and then maybe Felix runs out of gas and he ends up getting buried in a set. So a blowout set could help you out anyway for the spread. But Musetti has also won each of the last 2 clay meetings in the head-to-head. So even when there was not a fatigue issue for Felix, Musetti was still doing pretty solid on clay against him. But I like the +110 here, fading a potentially fatigued player that's been playing a bunch of tennis against Musetti, who's still been in great form despite dropping the last match to Djokovic. So once again, the picks for the matches for the Olympics here, the final Olympic episode, the lock's going to be on Alcaraz team total over 12.5 games at -120. And for the dog, I am going to go with Musetti -2 on the spread at +110. That's going to wrap it up for this episode. Reminder, back once again in the morning for the Washington semifinals. So we're going to preview those 2 matches, Caboli and versus Shelton, and Tiafoe versus Korda. So we're going to preview both those in the next episode. Until then, though, find me on Twitter at Reichel Radio. Find me on the NBA show. A reminder that Lonte and I did do an Olympic episode for the Saturday card, if you want to get some opinions on the U.S. game against Puerto Rico, as well as the Serbia game against South Sudan. But until next time, a good luck to all of you and all of your bets. Bye, everyone.